Thank you. Thank you. So I assume it's my turn. I'll just make a very brief introduction to our webinar today. I'll keep my words very limited because we are here to listen to Natalie, Patty, and Francis. So this webinar is, thank you. Thank you for the agenda. So we are here for a webinar on policy to implementation technologies, the EOSC-Future RDA Artificial Intelligence Data Visitation Working Group's output framing Lifetime Omics Data Visitation Technologies. So mainly, we are going to put three of the deliverables of this working group as landmark policy documents today, which are the guidance for ethics committees reviewing artificial intelligence and data visitation, guidance for informed consent in the context of artificial intelligence and data visitation, and the AI Bill of Rights recommendation. So our aim is to bridge the gap between policy documents and real-world applications. And for this, we're going to focus on the intersection of open science, data governance, and the cutting-edge technology, which is the artificial intelligence that we are all struggling with. So here today, we're going to have a demonstration of the FAIRLYZ platform, if I am pronouncing it right. If not, please forgive me and correct me. Platform, and we'll show how ethical and legal guidance can be used to support actionable tools for data visitation. So today we are going to start with Professor Natalie Meyers, and she's going to present on the EOSC-Future RDA AIDV Working Group's deliverables as framing documents. She's going to give us a brief glimpse of what these documents are saying, so that we can find the link between these policies and what Patty is going to tell us about real-life applications. So after Natalie, we are going to hear from Francis, and he's going to give us a brief explanation, or let me say, talk about policy to implementation in the digital space. And then we're going to hear from Patricia Buendia, and to understand about how data visitation, effective methodologies and technologies, including the hands-on demonstration of FAIRLYZ technologies and the Lifetime Omics data visitation platform. So with this, I'm just going to step out and leave the floor to Natalie for her presentation.
Thank you, Eilif. I really appreciate that introduction. For those joining us online who would like to go to our slides, you can see a link here, or use this QR code you see on your screen. I hope that's helpful. These slides are at bit.ly/AIDV-WG1724. And if someone could pop that in the chat, that would be terrific. Let's move on to a brief summary of the AIDV recommendations. Eilif mentioned guidance for ethics committees and IRBs, informed consent, and the AI Bill of Rights. A quick look at these show our aim to approach a comprehensive global investigation of AI governance, inclusive of ethics, human rights, regulation, health, open science, evolving AI technologies and applications, focused on delivering state-of-the-art guidance for international reference and institutional implementation. Patty is going to talk to us about implementing tools within a data visitation environment. And I'm here to introduce you to some of the opportunities for taking up the AIDV's recommendations and guidance documents, and to share those outputs with you. And later we'll have a conversation about some of the challenges addressed, some of your challenges, and things that you see today that spur discussion. looking toward the guidance for informed consent in data visitation. This document is available online at the RDA website. I'll give you a quick summary. It includes a background about the AI challenges for human autonomy, a section on informed consent guidance, including human-centered AI, and informed consent in scientific research, and then challenges of artificial intelligence and data visitation, and to the conception and practice of informed consent. In other words, when we empower machines to visit our data set or create licenses that allow software and lab teams to send their software to our data sets, do we need to change the way we think about informed consent to data for and about persons present in that data set or researchers whose data sets are used in data visitation and AI environments? And finally, within that document, we have a section on recommendations on informed consent in AI, DV, and open science. And you'll see both summary of global governance and research and development scenarios and specific cases available for you to dive deeper into. Here's a quick look at informed consent in the context of AI and DV at both global and European levels, and some observations that our guidance team has brought to our attention. The need to foster and strengthen trust, understanding, and collaboration for stakeholders, the need to incorporate broad, dynamic, and processual forms of consent in developing informed consent frameworks for AI and human-computer interaction, and the problems posed by big data analytics and AI black box models, and the way we do attention extraction business models and how that operates against the exercise of autonomy and practice of informed consent. Here's a look at a grid available in the document that helps you find yourself on the left and then look within the global governance and research and development columns to find a summary, and then you'll see a link to recommendations for specific cases for clinical, non-clinical, and genetic research, and a DOI here at the bottom to help you access that governance. If someone could pop that DOI or URL into the chat, that would be really helpful. Next, we mentioned guidance for ethics committees reviewing AI and DV. This terrific team has posted their guidance for review and for uptake. What they've built here is guidance for ethics committees or institutional review boards who are reviewing AI and DV projects, and how they may need to build multidisciplinary review committees, identify potential risks related to AI, and how they might need to develop new materials to assist regulatory review of research, including AI and DV, so that these research ethics committees and IRBs can document their assessment of the risks and benefits of using AI and DV in research, and also to guide members of those committees so they can qualify their decisions in a way that does not exclude any significant evaluation criteria. There's a need on these committees to develop targeting training programs to identify risks in research and to use those training materials to identify risks of AI and DV, including trainings on how to differentiate between ethical and model technical risks. These will need to be updated regularly to catch up with the latest developments in AI technology. And that means we'll probably have to detect ancillary committees to assist with review of AI and DV in research, because the risks of AI and DV extend beyond research to healthcare operations. And we can see this both in the EU AI Act, which characterizes health and medicine as high risk de facto within the EU AI Act. So those systems are going to be treated at that risk level. We also seen the need to evaluate the ethical issues presented and avoided by the use of AIDV in a research proposal, so that we consider the open science principles, responsible conduct of research principles, data and research integrity, and ethical principles that an IRB or an ethics committee would typically bring to bear in approvals of research projects or recommendations for better ensuring subject protections and ethical conduct of research. Our AI Bill of Rights recommendation was part of a team that I participated on, where our aim was to produce an AI Bill of Rights communique for the EOSC-Future project and the RDA that promoted fundamental human rights and advanced trust in AI and federated systems for open science. In this document, which if someone could pop this link into the chat, that'd be terrific. We review the critical tenets of an AI Bill of Rights, the relationship to the other AIDV outputs and efforts, including the guidance on informed consent and the guidance for ethics committees. We offer recommendations on essential elements of responsible AI, recommendations on doing impact assessment, or AIIA. We'll look at that more closely in a moment, and how to do AI alignment. And finally, we summarize with an informative section in this document that will be of interest to all of you, that helps us keep up with the evolving AI landscape. As AI regulation accelerates, we're seeing a lot of AI risk regulation dominating the governance conversation. And when we look at the landscape of emerging standards and jurisdictional AI policies, we can begin to take a look across the world at what the landscape of interoperation within our systems is going to look like in the legal and policy environments. Moving from the UNESCO recommendations on AI ethics through regional, country, and municipal level policies and foci, including the OECD's ethics guidelines for trustworthy AI, the GPAIs, and then country by country, China, Taiwan, Africa, Middle East, European Union, Council of Europe, the United States and Canada, UK, how that differs, and how it is business forward, Latin America and the Caribbean, and Australasia. What does this look like in Australia compared to the UK, EU, and US, and New Zealand? How do we put forth our Indigenous rights at the same time that we do new AI policies, and how it's important they don't cancel each other out or contradict one another? The document ends with a discussion of jurisdictional pluralism and cross-national layering. We discuss AI in migration, AI in health and medicine, particularly in silico clinical trials and digital twins. And we discuss changing employment and educational landscapes and how they're impacted by AI. The essential elements of responsible AI that we recommend that you can visit in the guidance document are here on the screen for you. AI and acceptable use policies, how those need to be formalized at the beginning of projects, formation of AI working groups or oversight committees, AI training and education for people within organizations, the necessity to include AI impact assessments or AIIA, the necessity for ongoing monitoring, and whether you'll have a human in the loop, over the loop, or out of the loop monitoring plan, the need for preparing to do transparency notice and disclosure, the need to do vendor due diligence when you have licensed tools that begin to include AI components. Maybe you have to revisit your license agreements with the companies that you have agreements with, and the need to test your AI systems for bias, the vended systems you use, and the systems you produce or deploy. What is impact assessment? Impact assessment elements are essential to prioritize as part of a responsible AI strategy and RAI for any group. What you have to do here is determine what will be your process, what will be the way you document your impact assessments, how you will assess AI system impacts on individuals and groups of individuals, how you will assess societal impacts of your AI systems, and how you will conduct your AI system impact assessment process. There are companies and tools who can help you do this. And within the document, we offer some guidance on how to structure the way you do this process. Here's a flow chart for applying an AI from an organizational perspective. This can be really helpful, and part of the reason why I like it is here on the right, we can see many of the things that we do already in today's information systems governance arena. For example, data protection. For example, environmental impact. For example, risk management and other due diligence activities. In other words, your company is doing these things already, or your research organization. They don't go away because you have AI. They ride concurrently with your AI. And they may coincide with your human rights attention, your legal infringement attention, your safety and security, and any societal issues that you want to address in your governance assessment of your information systems. AI alignment is an AI safety and research process that helps you ensure your AI systems achieve desired outcomes. You need to be able to define your system or policy's desired outcomes, articulate how you'll document the process for monitoring, measuring, and logging those, and know what you're going to do if you achieve or fall short of achieving the desired outcomes and benefits of your AI or AI policy. A friend of mine at Amazon Web Services calls this knowing when you're willing to turn it off. If your system sways so far out of alignment with your agreed upon policy or desired outcomes, when are you willing to turn off, retrain, or migrate? You'll need to do auditable detection for bias, auditable detection for privacy violations, and have a control and escalation process that assigns responsibility for investigation, a process for that investigation, and a process for notification and disclosure of violations. Then you'll have to think through what will be your process for reconciliation or restitution to impacted individuals and groups if you need to mitigate or correct consequences of a non-aligned AI. Again, here, the policies and responsible AI related regulations that we're seeing emerge worldwide provide guide rails for how to do this, and some building blocks for thinking through where in the life cycle development of your product or your deployment of a vended tool you'll need to do these things, and who you need to cooperate with in a regulatory environment in order to offer your tool to users. Here I show a working definition of data visitation from our data visitation team. And this refers to a process in which data sets are subject to analysis within a host location without the data ever leaving the host location. The analytical framework can be submitted by a third party to the host location, and the results can be returned to that party. Now we're going to hear briefly from Francis about moving from the policies I've just described to implementation in the digital space. Francis, I hand it over to you.
Thank you, Natalie. And on the one hand, you've made it very easy for me because I think you've said just about everything we need to say about the Research Data Alliance and EOSC-Future Artificial Intelligence and Data Visitation Working Group. You've gone through the outputs very well. I just perhaps make a few points here. I've put firstly in the chat the links to the documents, Natalie, that you've mentioned to everyone, and also a link to our working group. And eventually I'll get a link in there so how you can join the RDA if you want to, just so people have that as well. We started this Research Data Alliance working group almost 3 years ago, I believe. Natalie can correct me on that, or Elif could correct me as well. And what we started with is we came out of really the COVID period. And early on in the COVID period, I was working with a number of people, a very small working group that was not aligned with any organization, on looking how we could do data sharing, and in particular, how we could do data sharing through data visitation. Because one of the things that we recognized was that it's very difficult for people to share data, even if they want to share data. That is because of regulatory considerations, of course, but it's also just because sometimes of organizational considerations, also because of the complications that people have with regard to wanting to share their data. And why we thought data visitation would be interesting is because with data visitation, as I think Patty will explain best, is you don't need to give up your data. You don't need to move your data or anything like that. Natalie, you're sharing your screen, just so you know here. And so that's important to us. So what we have done within the European Open Science Cloud and the RDA AI Data Visitation Working Group is try to give a policy framework with regard to both ethics, human rights, and regulatory situations. So we've looked at that from a global perspective, I think a largely European perspective too, because of the GDPR and the European AI Act, but also from a really global perspective as well. And we've set out these 3 documents here that Natalie has well explained, one on informed consent, one on ethics review, and one on human rights. But what we thought also was important was to make the transition from policy into practice, policy into really, let's say, frameworks that can work. So we have put together a project that's now part of a proposal to do this together with Patty's group, to try to understand how we can actually have the technologies that are needed to do data visitation. And I don't know, I think our working group was one of the first working groups to really explore data visitation, but to explore it in a policy way. Patty has one of the first organizations really to actually try to achieve that. This is being done in the health data space, particularly within the omics, genomics data space, but I think it's relevant to all data spaces going forward. We need policy. So this is a terrible thing to say, perhaps, but we need policy because what policy gives us is 2 things. Policy gives us goals, so sort of agreed upon goals that we want to achieve. And policy also gives us agreed upon pathways to achieve those goals. But we can't wander down those pathways if we don't have the tools that we need to get towards the goals that we want. So it's all well and good for everyone to agree, oh, there's a pandemic, we need to share our data. There's an earthquake, we need to share our data. Okay, there's mpox, we need to share our data. Everybody wants to do that. But actually doing that and actually giving a framework in which people feel comfortable doing that and are able to do that within a secure, safe environment is difficult. So Patty, first go back to Elif, she's moderating, but hopefully Patty will be able to show us the kind of environment that we need in order to feel secure in sharing our data, and the kinds of tools that we need to feel to make it possible for us to work in that secure environment. Elif?
Yes, Francis, thank you so much. Natalie, also thanks a lot to you for introducing the policy documents that we produced. So as Natalie and Francis said, we worked really hard to, bring out those deliverables, but they're just documents. And they have very limited value if we don't find a way to implement them to real world. So what that is going to do for us is now how we can bridge the gap between the policy and real life implementation. So the floor is yours, Patty. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Elif. Thank you, Francis. Thank you, Natalie, also. I'm happy to be here. I am happy to share with you what we have done with FAIRLYZ. And also, I really excited because this aligns so well with the efforts at this RDA AI data visitation group. And also time-wise, it's there's a lot of alignment because we just finished this pilot, and we actually it is the right time for us to receive guidance on how we can make data visitation comply with all the different guidance that you have, which will in turn result in the guidances being also changed or improved, and as well as on our side implementing this guidance into our software. So I'm the CEO of Lifetime Omics, and I'm going to just go straight to what FAIRLYZ is and why we developed it. So can we go to the next slide? Yes. So we sought to address the problem of data sharing for AI. And I'm mixing up a little bit of an introduction by also telling you about the problem. I'm a computer scientist and bioinformatician, and I've been on both sides of the research equation. I don't know if you call it like that. I've actually generated data, and I must tell you, it's not easy to generate data, like recruit patients and sample specimens. In my case, it was saliva, etc., and then do the whole analysis of the data and curate the data and have clean, curated, quality control data. And on the other hand, as a bioinformatician, you just access the data in different locations and try to have a larger sample size so you can run machine learning. So there's many problems with this whole new AI paradigm where it's necessary to access data. And some of these I'm showing here. The main one I would say is the data really reusable? We often find it's findable, etc., but we don't know what is the value of the data, what is the quality of the data. So next slide, please. So then we came up with this solution to develop a software platform called FAIRLYZ, in which our focus is really on data curation, on annotating data. This is an NIA-funded platform, and we have a pilot version of it. It is an MVP, minimum viable product, that any one of you can test out. And not all the features are implemented, but the main ones are there. And it's basically a registry, a central registry in the cloud where you can annotate your data, and you only store metadata. So the data stays wherever it is, and you only add information about the data. And then it is interconnected with a quality control tool that also uses AI to analyze the data wherever it is. So that is the data visitation feature of FAIRLYZ, or platform of FAIRLYZ. So it has two separate platforms. One is in the cloud, and the other one visits the data and runs data curation. And just to say, FAIRLYZ stands for Fair Data Principles, which many of you are familiar with, and it adds the list at the end for analyzable. Next slide, please. And so what we were thinking when we designed FAIRLYZ and then implemented it with the help of this NIAID contract is to really focus on quality. quality of the data. And for any, either, as you can see here, we have on one side the data contributors. And as I say, I've been on both sides. I've been a data contributor and I've been a data consumer. I've done studies in the hospital, recruiting patients. I had to get consent from the patients, etc. And then I had to analyze the data. And as a researcher, as a data contributor, I know that there was limited time for me to do data curation. I wasn't really thinking about data sharing. As I've been a data consumer, as a bioinformatician, I've run machine learning analysis on different things, even brain MRI images, and etc. And then I had to find data online. And we never knew if the data was good quality or not. We had to download it, and then we had to analyze it and see, is it, and curate it if possible. And sometimes we just never even, we realize this is not useful. And what we want to do here is to make data curation the centerpiece. And we do this with this data visitation tool. Next slide, please. Natalie, next slide. Thank you. So what happens during our data visitation tool? It's here simplified, and of course we are at the pilot phase, so there's a lot more that we have we're planning, but it's really, you are in the registry, in the cloud environment, the central registry, where you just annotate the data, you don't access the data. Then you set up this QC process, which involves installing the AI, the data visitation AI quality control platform or toolkit into the same compute environment where the data is being analyzed. And then there, let's say as a researcher or data manager or data curator, you curate the data, you clean it, the data, annotate it with data dictionaries, etc. And then you run the FAIRLYZ QC process. It is AI driven because some of the annotations, there's some mapping to ontologies, etc., that are done. Currently, they use OpenAI. Then you're going to see that in the memo that comes up next. We show a report and a quality control score. And so we have, in a way, gamified it because the researcher can see, oh, okay, I didn't hit this, what do you call it, flagpole or post. My English is sometimes not the best, but either way, they realize they didn't get it completely right. So they can go back, curate the data again, annotate it better, fix errors, and redo the QC. Once they're satisfied, they can then send a summary, a report to the central data registry. And so the central registry only receives summary results, not any information about the data, which keeps the data safe. And so that is the process. And next slide, please. Yes, so this is our team. Some of our team members are here, like Bob Warren, our CTO, and Patrick Shinoshita is also here. Thank you for joining us. I just wanted to quickly show everybody Kalai is in India, and so the time is not very good for her. I think it's sometime after midnight there. Next slide, please. And I'm going to start the demo and show you here's just some screenshots. And while I show you the demo, I would like you to also consider some of the questions that are very obvious for this collaboration between FAIRLYZ and the AIDV working group. And so let's go to the questions. Next slide. We're not going to answer them now, but this is one of the things this is one of the reasons why we're doing all this. It's for, we have the ideal situation here in which we have a software that is not completely built, that is being built, and it's ideal to add some of these guidelines. And so there are some questions that we have to think about. How are we incorporating support for informed consent, reconsent in the software? So this is a really practical, opportunity to implement all these different regulations. So I'm not going to go to each of them. This is just some proposed topics of discussion. And I'm going to start with the, so I guess I need to go to my, I need to share my screen. So let me see, it says I cannot share screen while the other participant is sharing. Okay, so let me try it again. Share. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Looks good.
Okay, good. So this is the FAIRLYZ data registry, which is a metadata registry. It does not collect data or read the data itself. FAIRLYZ doesn't. The FAIRLYZ QC app that is interconnected with this does, and it's used for sharing quality data with AI. We log in with Google. We also are implementing an ORCID login. And because I have already onboarded, usually you're onboarded as a new user, but because I've already been onboarded, I will go directly to the homepage. And in the homepage, you see a list of studies by all kinds of researchers that have studies entered into the registry. And you can search for some of these, for doing a text box search, or you can search by data type, how much sequencing data you have. And there are two versions of this platform. There's one that you see here that any of you can access. And it's a public registry where we're hoping to bring in research from all over the world to participate and start adding their studies and for us to help them with their data curation and annotation and the data sharing. We also want to implement features for collaboration so they can find collaborators around reuse of their data and to publish in journals. And so there's two versions of this. This is the public one. The private one is for a university or any organization, even pharmaceutical companies that are running many different studies, where they want to keep all their studies organized by all their researchers and be able to run quality control on them. So that's the private version. This is the public version. And as a researcher, I have a dashboard, and I can see here all my studies. This one here, the salivary microbiome, I published this year, and also collaborations. When we look at a study overview, you can see we are following some of the FAIR principles, especially here, findability and discoverability. We annotate the studies with ontology terms from different ontologies, and we show the definition. So it's not that the user can just type in any term. They have to use them from specific ontologies, and obviously in this case also relevant to omics data. Now here we go to the process of registering the data. In this case, we already have registered some data. When data has been registered and QC'd, meaning quality control has run on the data, we see a checkbox, like here with demographics data. When it has been profiled but not QC'd, you see a yellow check marks, and data that has not been profiled at all has an empty checkbox. So let's look at demographics data. We collect information about the data here. One of the things we want to know, obviously, is the data location. Because this is about my own study, I must admit I cannot share this data publicly. It is data from a hospital study. And so you can contact me if you would like to have access. This is actually my data. And we list some of the access restrictions here, including some comments. If this data was reused data, we also support giving access to the curated data, because quite often, and I can talk a lot about what happens here with curated data is not shared back. And so we're trying to also be able to share back data. You can also rate the data. Often data is being reused, but nobody knows if people had a good experience with it or not. So we support rating the data. And for demographics data, we also, this really depends on the data type. We also want to know if it's self-reported data or it's part of the clinical information. Software is not so relevant here, but it's the part of FAIRLYZ that makes it analyzable. It's very relevant for sequencing data, to know what version was used, what settings, etc. And then we go to the part that is the data visitation aspect. This requires installation of FAIRLYZ QC in the user environments. Here are the steps. There are 5 steps to install FAIRLYZ QC, and the actual installation probably needs to be done by an IT person or someone who knows that. But once it's installed, you open the FAIRLYZ QC in another tab over here. I already had it open here. Okay, and this is actually a user interface that is connected to FAIRLYZ QC, which runs where the data is. So it's only local. In this case, you can see localhost, and it's running on my computer where my data is. And you go and select your files. You select a data file, and you select a data dictionary that describes the data. In this case, we're using the dbGaP format. The dbGaP is a repository from the National Institute of Health, NIH, and it has a well-defined data dictionary format that is widely used, especially for restricted access data. Because we're talking about clinical data, we're using clinical demographics data, we also want to know when the data was collected, and then we run quality control on the data. So the quality control then is actually running this platform. This is the data visitation FAIRLYZ QC platform. Supports many add-ons, meaning you can add different functionality to it. In this case, the data dictionary checks that you see here are all from the open source code dbGaP checkup, which was written by the NIH. So it's code that is safe and secure to use. So that's one of the regulations probably, or guidelines to use. And as you can see here, you have a quality control score. You can also, I'm gonna speed up a little bit here. You can also use a mapping file. In this case, you can either create the mapping file with OpenAI. So this is one of the aspects where we're using AI already for analyzing. In this case, we don't analyze the data. We only analyze the data dictionary and map it to ontologies. And then we check the mapping. And when I say mapping to ontologies, in this case, we have demographic data, and we don't know how the data has been recorded. For example, maybe male was recorded as 1 and female as 2, and is as age, etc. Are all those demographic, is all the different demographic information available? So we do demographic mapping checks. These are part of, these are actually our own FAIRLYZ QC checks that you can see, and we require the mapping to like SNOMED ontologies, etc. for the mapping. And as you can see, the quality control score went up. This is where you can play a little bit with the system to get your highest score. And at that point, you can decide to sync it with the registry. If you don't have a data dictionary, we have another add-on. As I said, we add this different functionality to it, where as a researcher, you can create your own data dictionary if you don't have any, and you will be guided to enter the information that is required to follow the dbGaP data dictionary format. So back in the registry, that this ends my demonstration. There are many things that I can show you, but you do have guides, a guide on how you can use this software. And we're adding new features, and I think moving forward, we hope that we can work with our RDA AIDV working group to implement these new features and comply with the different guidances. That's it. Thank you. Oh, and we can go back. Yes, we can go back to the slide deck. I'm going to stop sharing.
Oh yes, thank you so much for this presentation. Now we can see how our policy documents can guide real-life implementation. So at this point, I would like to give the floor to you for discussion about what we have already demonstrated and presented. And may I ask some help from Francis to facilitate the discussion? Because Francis, are you here? Perfect. I'm so happy to see you. Because I might need to fly because of some pressing issues. So again, thank you so much for this presentation. And now the floor is yours.
I also think Natalie's better positioned to facilitate than myself too. If Elif has a sick patient at home, so she has to take care of her daughter as well.
Let's think about the questions Patty posed to us. How to implement criteria to assess potential risks associated with AI and data visitation. So we see in our recommendations some ways we could do data security checks and ways we could use a tool like FAIRLYZ to visit data and ensure those are in place. We can see it's important to provide clear and understandable information to users about the process and its potential impacts. I like the way the dialogue boxes in Patty's tool help us understand what we're looking at and what we're touching. And I like the way there's an example for doing data reuse and disclosing that, being transparent about it. We asked ourselves, how do we provide clear and understandable information to FAIRLYZ users? I wondered if those of us on the call could help us think through that. Maybe you have questions or comments for Patty regarding that or something else you saw in the demo. Let's open the floor for questions to Patty. If we got any questions from the audience, feel free to type them in the chat or to raise your hand or think through what we saw, or if you were on an ethics committee and people were using a tool like FAIRLYZ, what would you want to know about the tool or how they were using it? Francis, what would you ask?
Actually, sorry, if Francis has a question. I have actually a new question, which I didn't add.
Go for it.
And that was, as a software engineer implementing this platform, how do you balance the data security versus scientific advancement and software usability? Because I was trying to already think, how do we incorporate informed consent? And then the moment you incorporate more of the guidance, you sometimes make it less usable. So that was one of the aspects, like it's usually not being considered, which makes this so interesting because now you have an actual software where you can implement the guidance, not in an abstract way, where you have to balance that out.
Thoughts from the audience?
So
Maria has a question. She asks, how are you addressing interoperability of data if users are free to update their own metadata schemas? Is this challenging? So if I install Lifetime Omics and my metadata schema has an update, what happens next?
The quality control, currently the quality control aspect of it is it's being versioned. Every time you run a new quality control, you have a new version, but you decide whether to post it to the registry, to whatever, or central, to the central registry, and it's just linked to the study, basically a study, and to the particular data type. It's really a matter of versioning. And it's not, and that's why we're also very interested in the other RDA group. There's a data versioning group, and they have discussed it's not always easy. So those are the challenges there.
May I ask the question again, maybe live?
Please.
So, for example, I am dealing with imaging data, and the issue that we have is that different image repositories, they use different metadata schemas, and that's a very big issue for the users. So say that a user would update the image metadata on FAIRLYZ, and they would have their own metadata schema, how the different data sets would be interoperable with each other.
Mm-hmm. Well, so the idea is that you're using one type of annotation schema or metadata schema, as you used it here. In this case, you use data dictionaries to describe that. And if we're going to talk about imaging or MRI imaging, this is a good. This is something where we also would need guidance, like what are the best vocabularies or terminologies out there to annotate imaging. For example, I also I'm working with the multi-omics group. They don't have imaging in there. No, not the MRI imaging or medical imaging. So this is, I'm not sure if there's a group in RDA. I haven't looked yet into imaging. Imaging is a tricky area, and I've done AI on, as I say, on MRI brain images, so I know. But it's really about following guidances and then choosing one that is the most accepted globally, I would say, so that any researchers will be using the same schema.
Yes, I agree with the challenging part. Maybe I will get in contact with you afterwards and we can discuss something.
Oh, yes, no problem.
Thank you.
Maria, I think that's a very good question. Patty, perhaps put your email, if you want to, in the chat for Maria and those others who might be interested.
One
I think this is a huge problem
we
we have.
developed for helping with that problem was a quality tool where, with the human in the loop process, if the system recommended a metadata enhancement about an image annotation, the user could decide either in batch or one image at a time whether to accept that enhancement, or we could call that an update, a version update, or whether to be informed by it but not record it to the to an updated data set. So that's a human in the loop way to do it. Another way to do it is to accept all the computer's changes but have a older version that researchers can return to. It really has to do with how ready you are to move forward with doing it at scale. And I think that's part of why the review board recommendations are so crucial here, is when we move forward at scale, who are we impacting?
But just to say, right in 2 minutes, there's a meeting of the RDA working group on the verification of genomic annotations. And I think that also, Maria, I think that also kind of connects to your question too. How do we come up with, let's say, standardized metadata, standardized ontologies, which is exactly what the FAIRLYZ system is relying on. But how do you do that? How do you get interaction between different values and metadata, different reference points in your ontologies in order to be able to share data in this kind of blind space that that is being offered here? Go ahead, Maria. I think you want to say more.
Yes, and related to this, I'm not here to advertise anything, but I am working on such a project which is trying to standardize the metadata used for imaging data. But because clinical data is such a huge beast on its own, we are just touching the biological and the preclinical data. And this is a project that I will probably contact Patty about and see if we can have a discussion in the future about it. So
Yeah, so please advertise, put your propaganda if you want in the chat for everyone, because I think everyone here would be interested in that. Because of course it has to do, you're talking about imaging data. Patty is talking more about omics data, which can be imaged as well. But so we're all working in, let's say, somewhat different areas, but we all have a similar problem. And that is how to get to standardization or how to get to tools that can overcome the variety that we have. It's probably the latter that we need, and also maybe these AI tools that Patty has as well. One other thing I just wanted to ask Patty about is, Patty, so Maria has her data sets, I have my data sets, Natalie has her data set. Natalie wants to query Maria's data. And Natalie and Maria have both gone through your quality check with FAIRLYZ. Does your platform also make it possible for Natalie to query Maria's data, or Maria to query Natalie's data, and also to give a report back on what their experience was? It's a genuine question. I don't know the answer.
Yes, so the way the process works is you can, in the central registry, you can look at information on any data set that has been registered. So in this case, yes, Natalie would see Maria's data sets and vice versa. And you would see a quality control score on the data, and a report also would be available. Now, really accessing Maria's data would require the whole permission structure that Natalie has defined. Oh, if you need my data, you need to have this or that, or be approval, and that has to be handled. At least at this point, we are not handling it. But then we would give the quality control tool to Maria to use if she's allowed to use it. So that would be managed outside the platform. The actual access to the data from someone else.
And then one other question, I think it's important for all of us and for our working group as well. Brian Nagano has asked the question, is it open source? Patty, you responded, but Brian, do you want to elaborate on your question anyway? Let's see that. Okay. But I think this is, Brian, I need to be here. Okay, but this is an important question for us in the RDA working group, because we are kind of prejudiced, let's say, towards open source and towards open science. And of course, what Lifetime Omics is bringing is a company tool. But we think too that we need to be able to work between the public and the private sector in this. This is an example of what is possible, what has been realized through a private initiative, let's say. But the question that we're asking here is not so much who does it, or whether it's public or private, open science, not, but rather what are the possibilities? How can we actually do data visitation? Actually do it, not just have fantastic guidelines that Natalie and her team have written, but really actually do it. And Patty has brought us an example of a reality that's still a work in progress as well, we should say, but also a reality of how to do it. And I cannot imagine that we will go forward without doing an enormous amount of data visitation in the future, because it is going to be the most secure way to share data and to guarantee also, especially with sensitive data, let's say personal data or something like that, but to ensure the integrity of that data as well in doing it, and to ensure the security that we need for it. Patty, did you want to say anything else about anything else here?
Regarding the question about open source, we are using a platform, the actual data visitation platform that is installed in wherever the data is a commercial product, but we are opening up the ability to add different functionality to it. Just as you saw, we added dbGov Checkup, which is an open source tool. We created our own other tool that is add-on, and some of these add-ons we're going to open source. For example, the data dictionary, creation of the data dictionary is something that we can open source. So there are things that we will both use open source and that we will open source, but the actual data visitation platform not. And also the FAIRLYZ registry is somewhat of a data management platform. So that one, you know, we have it as a commercial product, but the result of it, the portal where you see all the studies, we're actually going to have a fairlyz.org website where anybody in the world can go and look at the studies. They cannot enter information, they cannot, you know, edit anything. So it's to find the data, to make the data discoverable. So there are aspects that are open science and there are aspects that are commercial. And the idea is really to come up with new solutions to involve more researchers into data sharing and helping them with quality control. And we believe this, you know, this is the way we're doing it. And also coming up, I wanted to say with a sustainable way of doing this, because we do have, we're going to have like a subscription fee for actually managing the data, etc. Or we're going to ask for funding for that to support researchers in their curation efforts. So there has to be, you know, again, another balance between open source and commercial.
So Natalie and Alif and Patty, I think what we'll do is we will share the recording of this with everyone who registered for the meeting, and we'll share the chat with everyone who registered. This way, you'll also get Patty's email again, and Natalie's or somebody's like that, so that you can get in touch with us. I go back to Alif and Natalie to take us home.
We thank everyone for joining. There is a copy of the slides shared for you. And we thank you for joining. You can also join the RDA AIDV working group for free if you want to receive announcements of future events like this and track the progress, or if you would like to do an adoption or implementation of any of the recommendations or provide suggestions for future iterations. We're curious about that too. So we thank you for joining us. And we hope that we'll see you at future AIDV working group meetings. Any closing thoughts from anyone? Otherwise, I guess it's a wrap. Thank you so much, Patty, for joining us today.
No, thank you. You're welcome.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.